It's 2011, inside the attic room of a flat in West Kilbride near Glasgow, where 4 men controlled the final weeks of Lynda Spence's life. 2 men stood guard while she endured day after day of horrific torture and humiliation. Over a 13-day period, Colin Coates and Phillip Wade had subjected 27-year-old Lynda to the most depraved acts. They had cut off her fingers, crushed her toes, burnt her with an iron, and beaten her with a golf club. She was then murdered and her body hidden, and at the time of this video, over 13 years later, her body has still never been recovered. The crime became infamous in Scotland due to its sadistic nature and the extremely unique characters within the overall story. So what were the events that transpired that led to her life ending in such a cruel and terrible fashion? You are watching OCG TV. Chapter 1. The Conwoman. Lynda Spence was a 27-year-old self-employed financial advisor. She ran a mortgage broking and property rental and sale business in Glasgow. Her business affairs were chaotic and she was heavily in debt. She had become embroiled in fraudulent activity for which she was being investigated by the Police Scotland. She had a girlfriend, Aliona Codreanu, with whom she was living at the time of her disappearance. There was evidence that Ms. Codreanu was a prostitute who was associated with an Albanian criminal called Sokal Zefaj. Lynda Spence had also been romantically involved with Zefaj and was suspected in having been involved in criminal activity with him. The police believed that he was involved in drug trafficking and money laundering. Shortly before she went missing, the deceased agreed to assist the Scottish Crime and Drug Enforcement Agency as a covert human intelligence source, or a CHIS. She was to provide intelligence on Zefaj and other suspected criminals. Everyone who associated with Lynda Spence knew she had a taste for the high life, luxury hotels, crystal champagne and cars. But it was all a facade. In reality, the extrovert businesswoman who often frequented Glasgow's West End was a fraudster and a thief. Lynda broke the law in 2 ways. She committed fraud by taking money from people and then squandering it on her lavish lifestyle. But she also acted as a facilitator by providing people with forged documents to get them a mortgage. Her services for people who did not have the necessary paperwork were well known within Glasgow circles. However, her legitimate business acumen left a lot to be desired. In fact, her business partner Tony Kelly later described her murky dealings as absolute chaos. One involved 30 members of Glasgow's Chinese community who handed over £175,000 in deposits on flats at a housing development at Lockburn Gate, Maryhill. But no reservation fees were paid. Lynda simply pocketed the lot. She often used aliases, and an investigation found she used 20 different mobiles in the 18 months before she vanished. During the later murder trial, an image emerged of a young woman who mixed with the wrong people and audaciously ripped them off. And her luck finally ran out when she met Colin Coates. Lynda had promised Coates a £3.2 million return on an £85,000 investment in a project that was to take place nearby Stansted Airport. The investment was to be repaid in Danish bearer bonds to avoid VAT. This was a skill that Lynda did have, the ability to come up with specific aspects of a business deal that sounded unusual but would significantly benefit the end user. It gave a sense of plausibility and helped convince her victims that she was legit. This is what befell Colin Coates, who did not know the deal was a scam and the bonds were forgeries. Lynda went to great lengths, claiming another fake investor was also on board. She even flew to North Carolina for a business meeting, attracting the attention of the FBI. By early 2010, it wasn't just the authorities who were after Lynda. Coates and various others across the Glasgow area wanted their cash. Lynda's world began to crash down around her. She was under serious pressure. With no sign of his money, Coates and an acquaintance by the name of Phillip Wade cornered Lynda in the street. They were not messing around any longer or buying her delay tactics. She was bundled into a van and quickly driven off without any witnesses. Chapter 2. The IT Killer. Colin Coates was a computer expert who had a highly successful life. He had built a glittering career, married, had 3 children and a fortune in the bank. His extraordinary IT skills took him first to the Civil Aviation Authority, where he helped develop air traffic control systems, and then to the world of investment banking, where he designed trading floors. Coates was richly rewarded, making over £200,000 a year, and had further income from property development. However, over time he developed a penchant for alcohol and drugs, and violent flaws in his personality took him into the world of organised crime. He had begun to go off the rails even before he was introduced to Spence. He had appeared in court after threatening holidaymakers during a flight, assaulting his wife, and terrifying the weak and greedy around him became his stock in trade. He quickly developed a reputation for an explosive temper and, because of it, lost all he then held precious. The introduction to Lynda Spence by mutual business friend Tony Kelly created the ingredients of a tragedy for all concerned. His close friend Phillip was more than happy to get involved in a plot against Lynda Spence. He had given Spence some money to buy his children Christmas presents while he was on remand in prison. Needless to say, the money did not get passed on. Coates and Wade forced Spence into a car on Broomhill Path, Glasgow, on 14 April 2011 and drove her to West Kilbride, Ayrshire, where David Parker and Paul Smith let them into Parker's flat in Meadowfoot Road. Wade carried in a tool bag that was referred to during the later trial as the torture kit, containing garden loppers, surgical tape and vinyl gloves. They took the woman upstairs to the attic area and taped her to a leather chair by the arms and waist. Coates and Wade would arrive each day to hurt her as a way of trying to extract financial information. She was burned with an iron and hit with a golf club, and they crushed her toes, cut off her thumb and severed her little finger. Spence was not allowed to move from the chair for the 13 days she was there and had to urinate and defecate where she sat. She endured 14 days of hell, bound helplessly to a chair at the hands of her tormentors. Coates used Lynda's mobile and email accounts to pretend to her family and friends she was alive and well. Coates' aim was to force Lynda to tell what she had done with the money she owed Coates in the bogus land deal. He believed he had been ripped off and wanted revenge and his money back. It's not known if Lynda ever told the men what they wanted to know. One thing is certain, she would not live to tell the tale. Lynda was finally murdered around April 28, 2011, and Coates is believed to have cut off her head before disposing of her body. Her worried parents, Patricia and Jim, reported her missing on May 13, and appeals were made to the public for information. Coates became a prime suspect and was placed under surveillance, but detectives found witnesses too scared to speak out. The breakthrough came on August 16 after Coates left one witness so terrified for his life that he went to police. On October 28, 6 months after Lynda was murdered, officers smashed their way into the West Kilbride flat. Police found a spot of Lynda's blood on the bathroom floor and his fingerprint on the door handle. Mobile phone evidence also placed Coates and Wade in West Kilbride throughout Lynda's ordeal. As a result, both men stood trial in February 2013 at the High Court in Glasgow, accused of her murder, despite there being no body. Chapter 3. The Court Case. A series of credible witnesses would eventually take the stand to give evidence and provide the prosecution a cast-iron case. The 2 men who kept guard gave evidence in return for lesser sentences. Smith and Parker had been paid £10,000 to babysit Lynda after her abduction. Paul Smith had claimed he had been hoodwinked into providing a safe house where Coates and Wade could keep her. He claimed Lynda was alive when he last saw her, but was too scared of Coates to let her go free. David Parker confirmed that Lynda was held at his home in West Kilbride for around 13 days. He told police that he believed Coates and Wade had murdered Lynda, then disposed of her body. He broke down while giving evidence. Asked if he spoke to Lynda, Parker said, "She just said she wished she hadn't got herself into this mess. I told her to tell these guys what they want to know and get it finished." Both Coates and Wade went to remarkable lengths to cover their tracks after Lynda's murder. The loft carpet was removed, Floorboards were replaced and an industrial-scale clean-up operation was carried out, including burning the chair. However, they still left behind the tiny amount of forensic evidence that linked her to the Chamber of Horrors, where she met a brutal end. Lynda's business partner, financial advisor Tony Kelly, had introduced Lynda to Coates and was the first witness to recall a confession from the accused. He said Coates told him, "I killed her last Thursday." Coates also made a comment about Lynda being seafood. Kelly took it to mean that her body was dumped in the water. He also claimed that when he tried to get hold of Lynda after she went missing, Coates told him, "You might need to do that through a medium." Another witness, Pamela Pearson, claimed Wade confessed to her that he and Coates had disposed of a woman's body in the hills. The landlord of the torture flat, a man named James Dillon, told the court 3 pieces of flooring had been replaced in the attic room where Lynda was tortured. Peter Hadley, who met Coates while he was on remand in Addywell Prison in West Lothian, claimed Coates had told him that he cut off Lynda's head and put her body in a furnace. Company director John Glenn was a key figure in the case, and screens were erected in court for his evidence. He first met Lynda in late 2009 through his property business and lost money he invested with her. But he continued to do business in the hope he could recoup his losses. Glenn claimed that if you listened to Lynda, you would believe that she was a millionaire a couple of times over with a property in Glasgow and property abroad. On one occasion, Lynda had phoned him to cancel a meeting at McDonald's in Glasgow's Crow Road. He explained that Spence had said to him, "He, referring to Colin Coates, is going to kill me. I need to get his money back for him." She sounded very distressed at the time. It was the last time Glenn spoke to her, but on April 26, he met Coates at a shopping centre in Broomhill. Glenn claimed Coates told him that he needed to show him something. He then pulled out a plastic supermarket bag. Glenn said, "When I looked in, there was a thumb inside the bag. I was horrified by what I saw." Coates replied, "We've got her, we've always had her." Glenn then added, "I knew straight away he was talking about Lynda Spence." The following day, the pair met again, and Glenn told Coates he would need a copy of a valuation from Lynda. Coates replied, "If you want one, you will need to organise a séance." Glenn stated that this led him to believe that he had murdered Lynda. To this date, Lynda's body is yet to have been found. Coates is believed to have suffocated Lynda in the bathroom before putting her bloody remains in the boot of her silver Vauxhall Astra. The jury took around 20 hours to reach their guilty verdicts on Coates and Wade following a trial that had lasted 46 days. Both men were given mandatory life sentences and warned by trial judge Lord Pentland that they could die behind bars. Coates was ordered to serve a minimum sentence of 33 years before he can be considered for parole, while sidekick Wade was given a tariff of 30 years. Trial judge Lord Pentland told Coates he was a highly ruthless and dangerous man who had been the driving force behind Lynda's torture and murder. He added, "You were the more dominant and controlling personality. You were the prime mover and shaker behind the abduction, torture and murder of Miss Spence. You were clearly a man of some intelligence who attained a measure of some success, but you are a manipulative, devious, cruel personality and resorted to violence where you perceived you had been thwarted." Lord Pentland said Wade had been driven by greed to commit a truly monstrous and barbaric crime. He told him, "You are motivated by greed and the thirst for revenge. The evidence shows you are a violent and dangerous man with no respect for human life. You will not necessarily be released after 30 years and may indeed never be released." Neither of the killers showed any emotion as they were handed their life sentences. Minutes after the verdict, Coates was served with an order under the Proceeds of Crime Act and said, "Oh, thanks very much," to the police officer who served it on him. Parker and Smith were each jailed for 11 years for assaulting Lynda and holding her captive. In July 2014, Coates and Wade lost appeals against their conviction and sentence. Both claimed they were victims of a miscarriage of justice and had been given longer sentences than the Lockerbie bomber. The 3 appeal judges concluded there was overwhelming evidence they had killed Lynda and the prison sentences were justified. Lord Gill said, There emerged, in my view, an overwhelming case that the appellants murdered the deceased. In my opinion, there was no miscarriage of justice. This was a barbaric crime that merited the severest penalty.